CTBK gives executives and owners of mid-market businesses unparalleled confidence and clarity so you can focus on strategic objectives and organizational success. Their multidisciplinary advisors, accountants, and team members have a wealth of experience and are all available and responsive to each client to ensure the most effective advice, actions, and outcomes no matter the situation or complexity level. That experience base and one-team approach, combined with integrated and efficient way of operating, enable them to be truly proactive partners, doing the best thing for their client every time. Visit ctbk.com or call 716-630-2400 to learn how CTBK can work for you.
And now, back to the man who's never afraid to throw virtual hands, the social media samurai, the tyrant of Twitter, the keyboard snatcher of souls, Tim Graham and Friends.
It's Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK, CPAs and Business Consultants. I'm Tim Graham of The Athletic, here with Jonah Bronstein of Bronstein Sports Plus. And hopefully everybody has recovered from the Bills' AFC East clinching victory over the San Francisco 49ers, whether you were there and had to deal with the elements or even watched from home. I guess you didn't need to stay up too late for satisfaction or to find out exactly what was going to happen with that game. The Bills had it well in hand. I think by halftime, when the Bills go 97 yards right before to take the 21-3 lead, Christian McCaffrey's already been knocked out of the game. The 49ers, even though they were doing some things were clearly out of the game by the half. However, if you shut the game off or if you went to bed earlier, you missed one of the crazier plays in Bills history. Josh Allen scoring a touchdown, a double touchdown. If it's fantasy football, you got credit for a touchdown pass and a touchdown reception on the same play. You missed out on that 1 point for the reception, though, because Amari Cooper got the 1 point. Anyway, Jonah, your thoughts on the Bills. 5 straight AFC East championships. And look, you're in the National Football League. You can't just play your JVs for the month of December. They still have to play out the string. They are at Los Angeles this week. Really, the only game of interest to me remaining on the regular season schedule is Detroit, because that's a potential Super Bowl preview. But yeah, the Bills are chasing AFC number 1 seed, which has tremendous value, and you don't want to slide. You don't want to, get into some sort of malaise here in December. I guess maybe that's the question I'll pose or throw the topic out for discussion. The concept of taking your foot off the gas. They've won their division title on December 1st, 5 games left. How do you handle December, I guess, is the question.
Well, I'm going to answer the first question you asked. I'll go back to that. I think it's, maybe important's not the word, but I think it's worthwhile to stop and kind of pause and appreciate what the Bills have done so far, what they did last night in the last 2 games over a 3-week stretch. I think 2 of the, what will go down as the most memorable and greatest wins in Bills history, if not this 49ers win. That's not another great team like the Kansas City Chiefs were, but it's a team that was in the Super Bowl last year. And I don't know how many times
they beat the 2 teams that were just in the Super Bowl in a 3-week span and had a bye in between.
Yeah, I can't think of a Bills team that's done that in the following season. I'm sure it's happened before in the NFL, but I don't know if it happens too often. And they were impressive wins. This one more resounding than the one against the Chiefs. At home on national television, this one, and really a national television audience in that 4:00 game 2 weeks ago. The snow factors into that. The incredible plays from Josh Allen, the winning run at the end of the Chiefs game, and then this play. Not only I don't think we've ever seen that before in an NFL game from an NFL quarterback, but I cover a lot of high school football. I cover, wild action midweek games, different levels of college football. I don't think I've ever seen that anywhere. They call it backyard football. I don't know if I ever saw a kid in the park make that play. I mean, you think
Oh,
about it,
okay,
maybe you've
sure
done
you
it on a
have.
video game, maybe you have, but the quarterback, you don't call that play. You don't kind of set it up and throw it that way and design it to, kick out and lateral run the, the pass option. So just, I think the combination of all of that, winning the division, tying the team record for doing it after 12 games, and they've never done it with 5 games left to play before. So the most dominant divisional performance the Bills have ever had, winning 5 in a row. They scored 30 points in 6 games in a row. They haven't done that since 2004, which is a season that didn't end well, but that stretch of 6 games in 2004 was about as well as the team had played at all during that era and previous and since then. So it's really, the Bills are playing as well as they ever have. It looks like, as much of a Super Bowl contender as they've ever had. There's still 5 games left in the regular season and the playoffs before we get to the Super Bowl. But right now, this is about as good as it gets. There's very little aspects of the team or the roster or the way they're playing to be concerned about. Very few injuries. Really nobody that's out for the season of importance. And the players that are injured seem to be on their way to coming back. It's just really a time, I think, for Bills fans to sit down and celebrate. And yeah, you don't want to celebrate too early in terms of what the season's going to amount to. But I would caution against worrying too much about what comes ahead and not appreciating how fun and exciting, and as a television product, how great the Bills have been over this last month.
Yeah, it's Victory Monday, I guess, for fans too. I mean, we're the media, we can start looking ahead. But yeah, I think we would advise fans to enjoy this time and not get too worked up. I do think, though, that December is also a time to find that next gear, to start getting ready for the playoffs. As Sean McDermott says, playoff caliber, or I'm sorry, championship caliber. It's playoff caliber during the regular season. And then once you get to the postseason, then it becomes championship caliber. There is a different gear you have to find. And you don't want to get some sloppy habits or some sloppy thoughts. I think the types of things that come with um, the sentiment of resting your starters in the regular season finale. What do you do there? Do you start them? Do you pull them after a series? Do you make them get ready for the game as if they're playing the whole thing? Um, that age-old debate as to what you're supposed to do in what used to be week 17, now week 18, I think now applies to the Bills over the course of a few games here. And you have 2 non-conference opponents coming up. Again, like I said, Detroit is a big one psychologically. I think that the Bills are going to want to test themselves against one of the great teams in the NFL. Maybe the Super Bowl favorites right now are the Detroit Lions, and what Dan Campbell's been doing there, and just a comprehensively good team. But the Bills also have in their mind not getting hurt, which can be a dangerous concept of just trying to yeah, it's going to be interesting for Sean McDermott to massage this period of time, because uh, even if you go back last year, the Bills were fighting. The Miami Dolphins were ahead in the AFC standings to the point where, with probably what, 5, I'd have to go back and look, and I will here as I talk, but with 5 games to go in the season last year, the Bills might not even have been in the playoff picture. And then the year before that, you had the Patriots with that weird, they had the opportunity to win the division late in the season, even though Tom Brady was gone. They still had that, there was just that weird scenario that the Bills have been fighting for these situations in the past.
Yeah, well,
And
let me
no, go
respond
ahead.
to that real quick. Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. And the one thing the Bills have really missed from this season has been adversity. They've had some adverse situations, Matt Milano's injury, some other injuries and things like that, but they haven't had that dip in the season like they had a year ago, where they had in most every season. 2020 maybe being the one that I can recall that they didn't, where there was some worry about whether the team would win the division or even make the playoffs a year ago, and what was wrong with the team, if there was some sort of fatal flaw in the way they were playing, or chemistry wise, or locker room dynamics with the pandemic. That was kind of a big story in that 2020 season. That's all been missing this season, and that's a good thing. I think it's made it more fun for the fans to just follow along, and the team winning almost every week and doing more amazing things every time you turn on the television. But Sean McDermott has always kind of preached an ethos of that adversity making them better, that kind of stoic philosophy of the obstacles make you better in the long run, and the Bills haven't had to clear too many obstacles so far this season. But what's interesting is, as great as this season's going on, I mean, they have a chance to win 14 or 15 games, the first time in team history they'd be able to do that. And if you look at some of the metrics and things like that, this could be the greatest Bills season of all time, the way it ends up if they keep playing at this level. Yet they're not in the first seed in the AFC. They're not, right now in that position to have home field advantage. There is some concerns about how they match up with Baltimore in the playoffs, so that you can't really point to the Super Bowl and start booking your flights and stuff, because the Bills still have a lot to get to, and they still have to maybe win every game left in the regular season, or if they lose that Detroit game, depends on what Kansas City does to get the number 1 seed. Pittsburgh's lurking there. If the Bills lose, if they slip up this week against the Rams, or they lose more than one of these games, there's a possibility the Bills don't even get the 2nd seed in the division. So they're still in the conference. So there's still a lot to play for. And I mean, I don't want to say this team needs a loss or could benefit from a loss, but they won 7 in a row. And the scenario where you sort of see them catching the Chiefs and being the number 1 seed in the AFC, that's another 5 wins in a row. So then you end the season winning 12 in a row. Then you're trying to go in the playoffs and win 2 more in a row to get to the Super Bowl. And I just don't really see the likelihood in the Bills going 14 straight wins without a loss all the way to the Super Bowl. There seems to be something.
Well, maybe that's their
adversity going to get in their way. Well, that's so right. So maybe that still needs to come, and that knocks off some of these, dream season scenarios of being the number 1 seed and having the easiest path to the Super Bowl, or setting a team record for wins, or things like that. But maybe having a little bit of adversity, getting knocked off in one of these games, somehow recalibrates them to be a better playoff team. Because you mentioned how hard they had to fight last year, and different end season scenarios in the last couple of years. They had to really play their best football in December, getting into the playoffs. That didn't always lead to them playing their best football in January into the playoffs. So I don't know. Maybe there's a different path towards being a Super Bowl contender this year, or a playoff team that peaks in the playoffs than they've had in the last couple of years. But it also seems like it's getting too easy, maybe, and it can't continue to be this easy week after week after week, especially at the end of the season if they don't need those games and they're not sharp anymore. That it could get too easy at some point later this month, and that could come back to get them a month from now.
I wrote a story heading into last season about a tight division, and that a tight division bodes well for a team to win a championship because of the idea of being battle tested, overcoming adversity, all those things that you have to do to be really good in your division. Teams that win comfortable divisions did not go on to win the Super Bowl. And you could say, well, the Patriots seem to win it comfortably every year. That's true. But when they won it most comfortably, they did not win the Super Bowl. And teams that won the wild card, in fact, had a better chance, or wild card teams had better chances of winning the Super Bowl than teams that win the division by 4 or 5 games. But just to recap where the Bills have been in recent years, I now have these in front of me. In 2019, after week 13, the Bills were in 2nd place to the New England Patriots. The Patriots were 10-2. The Bills were 9-3 at this point in 2019. In 2020, and I'm starting at 2019 because that's when Josh Allen was the starter, clear cut. He wasn't a rookie anymore, the whole thing. So 2019, they were in 2nd place to the Patriots at this time. Then in 2020, the Bills were only a game ahead of the Miami Dolphins. The Bills were 9-3. The Dolphins were 8-4. At this point in 2021, week 13, the New England Patriots were a game and a half ahead of the Bills just 3 seasons ago, 9-4. The Bills were 7-5. 2021, 2022, week 13, the Bills are just a game ahead of the Dolphins, just 2 games ahead of the Jets, 3 games ahead of the Patriots. So 2022, we had that bottleneck, and of course the adversity that was with Damar Hamlin towards the end of the season. The Bills really went through it in that situation. Then last year, at this point, Miami 3 games ahead of the Bills. Miami was 9-3. The Bills were 6-6, and the Bills were 11th in the conference. They were 4 spots out of the playoffs at this point last year at 6-6. And other teams had tiebreakers like crazy. And of course, we know that the Bills were able to rally in December. The Dolphins slid back, and that the Bills won their fourth straight AFC East title. So I just wanted to go back and show to illustrate the point of this team is used to being in the thick of things in December. This is rare territory. And is it going to be good? Is it going to be bad? You know, you can pick your spots. You can get guys, worked into the lineup. Maybe, Matt Milano gets put back on a pitch count to get him ramped up. Maybe you want younger players getting more time. It's a balancing act. Or do you not want to take your starters? What do you do with your offensive linemen? You don't want to start, these guys play every down. They play every game. Do you start putting in backup offensive linemen, start sliding them in there? But you have 2 non-conference games coming up, and then 3 division opponents in which they all suck. You got the Patriots twice and the Jets. And Aaron Rodgers might not even be the quarterback of the New York Jets by then. So these last 5 games, again, Detroit's interesting. But even that game, you can justify, I don't know. They're going to get their wins. They're going to get a few wins. But how important is winning versus getting prepared for the playoffs? That's something that Sean McDermott has never really had to worry about or consider prior to this season.
Yeah, but as long as the number 1 seed's still within reach and you can get that bye in the first round of the playoffs and home field against potentially that game with the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game, I think they're still trying to win every game. And the Bills are probably going to try to win every game, if not, some sort of scenario in week 18 going forward anyways. But I don't think there's any reason you take your foot off the gas or do anything out of the ordinary to rest players or prevent injuries right now. You see where we're at in a couple weeks. There are scenarios where the Bills could be pretty locked into their playoff seed going into the final few games and easier opponents at home against the Jets and the Patriots. But right now, I think the Bills are going for it and trying to win these 2 games, especially with the way Kansas City's playing and seeming like every week they go out there kind of asking to get beat. And they did get beat by the Bills. And as long as it looks like, the Bills still can get past the Chiefs and get the number 1 seed, that's something they haven't done in this McDermott era yet and might be the missing piece for them getting through the playoffs and getting to the Super Bowl. I think it's absolutely something to play for. And still from the, entertainment fan experience part of it, that game against Detroit's going to be a really big game. It's going to be one of the biggest late season matchups of teams with, really good records and opposite conference Super Bowl preview type games, that there's been in many years. And for the
CBS
Bills,
Sports is going to be there live, just like they were for the Bills game. They'll be live for only the second time in pregame show history, NFL Today, and for the second time it will be a Bills game. I don't think that's a coincidence.
Yeah, and the Bills, for all that they've done well this season and the lack of anxiety there's been for fans, the thing they really haven't quite done yet is beat another really good team on the road. They had those opportunities against Baltimore, and Houston was a good team at the time, or playing like a good team. They didn't get it done, and then they beat some more middling teams. Seattle's got a good record, winning record. But they haven't really gone out and beaten a really good team on the road. They beat the Chiefs at home. Detroit is pretty much the team that's number 1 in everybody's power rankings, maybe the only team that's being ranked ahead of the Bills in a lot of these lists. And whether it's a Super Bowl preview or not, that's an opportunity for the Bills to kind of affirm how good they really are and win a road game. And if they have to go to Kansas City in the AFC Championship game and they have that Detroit win under their belt, that's something that they can use for confidence. I think a lot of that sets up, but we're doing it right now. We're talking so much about the Detroit game. It does set up a kind of a trap game scenario with this game against the Rams, who aren't as good of a team, but a team that, has a good quarterback and played in the Super Bowl not that long ago and isn't a bad team, or a team like San Francisco that's so injured and beaten down that they're not really, all that competitive in this season anymore. And just, I think 2 back-to-back road games is something that could catch the Bills in one of these scenarios. I think it'd be interesting what the conversations are around the Bills if they were to lose these 2 games coming out here and they're not playing for the number 1 seed anymore. They're trying to cling to that number 2 seed. But then with some easier opponents and some home games, they still have an opportunity to be the number 2 seed, even if they don't win out. But it'll be kind of interesting what the, the feelings around the fan base and how much Super Bowl fever there really is if the Bills happen to lose one of these games, and really if the Bills happen to play poorly, because that's another thing they haven't quite done yet this season. I mean, I think maybe one of their worst performances was the game they won against the Jets, but even in their 2 losses, they got beat pretty bad by the Ravens. And maybe they played poorly in that game, but that was a game against another really good team. When the Bills haven't had that lay and egg game yet, and if they happen to do that against the Rams or another game on the schedule coming up, how does that change the perception about how really good this team is and who's the MVP and who's the coach of the year and all the fun conversations we're having right now?
Yeah, winning on the road, that's an interesting one. The Miami Dolphins in week 2, Thursday night football, that felt like a bigger win than it does now, looking at the Miami Dolphins season. But of course, heading in, people were talking about that being one of the teams to beat, the teams that were going to catch the Bills as the Bills were in their soft reset. And here come the Jets and here come the Dolphins. Probably Seattle is their biggest win because they did have to go out to the West Coast. Seattle's supposedly a tough place to play with the 12th man. Bills Mafia really took over that stadium, and it was really quite impressive to see, even for the cynic that I am about fan influence and our fans being the best and your fans suck and every fan base thinking it's special. I roll my eyes, you and I both do, about that stuff, but that was really incredible to see what the Bills fans were able to do in Seattle. Indianapolis does nothing for me. The Jets game at the Meadowlands. Yeah, I think that these next 2 games, either of them would be probably the best road win of the season for the Bills. Even the Rams, as down as they are, that would be a big win for them. Yeah, I had another point I was going to make that is kind of floated out of my head regarding, these games. I, you know, I think it had to do with load management and injuries and all that type of stuff, but I think we've covered it. Vanilla offense or vanilla, the things that you want to do. Are we back to preseason type mentality with play calling, Jonah? The things that do you want to get 5 more legitimate weeks on tape, or would you rather have a little bit more of a watered down product for playoff teams to have to worry about? But you have to. I think the mentality should be, we're going to do what we're going to do. We're good enough at it. We don't need to get cute with revealing anything, secrecy. Teams always keep a little bit under wraps or have plays that they want to pull out in certain situations. But yeah, I think that it would be incredibly dangerous to try to get into some kind of stealth mode here with this much time left in the regular season, with the thought of not giving a potential playoff opponent intel.
Yeah, and those are things that maybe could come into play later in the season, but I think it's too early now. There's too much still at stake, and it's just too early. You don't want 5 weeks, a whole month of taking your foot off the gas pedal and looking ahead to the playoffs. I think that's way too long, and you lose your sharpness, you lose your edge if you do that. It's dangerous to do that for 1 week or even 2 weeks. To do that 5 weeks out would be reckless and really out of character for Sean McDermott and the way the Bills have operated in the past.
Last night's game, the theater of it, Bills fans, I think, deserve that at least once a year. I know that it rolls out the discussion about the Dome Stadium. Should it be where it is, down in a southern or a South Towns snow band? Abbott Road, no dome, this dome, infrastructure, highways in and out, getting in there, plows, all that stuff. I do want to point out, as somebody who has written quite a bit about the stadium planning, one argument that I always get aggravated with is you put a dome on the stadium and it cures whatever issues you were going to have heading into this game. Yes, with shoveling out the upper deck and those types of things, perhaps. But if a game's going to get canceled, it has no, or it's going to get postponed or moved to Detroit, like the Browns game did a couple of years ago and the Jets game prior to that. It has to do with driving bans and the inability to move outside the stadium to get people to the game safely, whether it's the fans, the players, whomever. And it has nothing to do with whether or not there's a roof on it. Games get postponed and canceled in the National Hockey League and the National Basketball Association every winter. And those places have roofs on them. Roofs, roofs, roofs. I just learned recently, by the way, that it's Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs with an F. It's not Snow White and the Seven Dwarves, the original name of that movie. It's not right. It's like the Maple Leafs instead of the Leaves.
Fun fact.
So,
well, to talk about the stadium, I think the new stadium should have a roof or a retractable roof for the purpose of making it more functional and more type of events and more indoor events and things that even the team can do practice wise and community relations wise with an indoor structure out there. Whereas the outdoor stadium, that stadium sits pretty empty all week long until the Bills play in those games. And other than the high school championship games, there's really nothing else going on in that stadium. And an indoor facility or a hybrid indoor-outdoor facility would get a lot more usefulness, and I think a lot more use of a couple $2 billion. And also, I mean, I do understand why the Bills and the NFL kind of want to preserve this outdoor lake effect snow environment for the television product and just the history of the Bills being a team that played out in the snow. And if they stopped doing that, it would seem to really take some of the mystique away from the Buffalo Bills franchise and their fans and everything like that. However, I'm not going to get too involved in the details here because I'm not sure what exactly happened and what's really true. But there's a story going around yesterday. There was a young female fan in from out of town that was at the Bills game and might have gotten pushed or might have fallen into the stadium because of the snow. And I do think there's a real safety issue with getting all of that snow out of there and the way this current stadium is constructed. And I know the new stadium is probably going to be improved in some of those ways, but I don't think that, it's necessarily a good thing to have all of this snow into that stadium and to play these games in the condition that the stadium's in. So whether it's the new stadium or moving games back a day when that snow comes, I think there's still work to be done in terms of not having as much weather involved in the fan experience and the safety, even if the NFL likes that snow globe look on the screen. And last night wasn't the biggest snowstorm that we've dealt with even in recent years in Orchard Park, but it was a lot of snow coming down in the 3 hours that the game was being played. And I think it probably made well for the television product and influenced the game on the field. But I think I see both sides of it. I think there's a lot of benefit to having a roof and having a dome. You can have the roof keeping the snow out before the game starts and open it during the game if you want. The cost that it takes to shovel all that snow out and all the equipment and things like that. So I don't think it's a better situation without a roof, but I kind of understand the logic as to why there isn't a dome or some of the arguments for why there won't be a dome.
Merriam-Webster can settle at least one part of this debate. The plural of roof is roofs with an F. And the plural of dwarf is either or. It's either dwarfs or dwarves. So keep that in mind the next time you need to use the plural of roof or dwarf. One of the major problems with Highmark Stadium, inherent issues that they didn't factor in. The reason you need to hire people to come in to Highmark Stadium to shovel out the upper deck and the lower deck is because you have one tunnel leading in and out of that stadium, as everybody knows, where the players all come out. Most stadiums have at least two. The new stadium is going to have four in each corner, like a lot of stadiums do. So you're going to be able to move the snow out very easily. It's not one truck in, one truck out. The other problem, and why you need the sluice in the upper deck, where you always see that, the footage when the news crews go out there and do stories on the fans shoveling out the stadium, and they put the snow in the sluice and it heads on down to the field level for the dump truck to be able to cart the snow out of there and dump it somewhere, is because the concourses are so small, you can't bring trucks in through there like you can in newer stadiums. So the new stadium will not have this situation. You won't need to bring in people to shovel out the upper deck, the lower deck, the field. And the other one more part of the field too is with a lot of stadiums, and I don't know if the new stadium is going to quite be like this, because some even newer stadiums are tight, like in Baltimore, where the fans are right on the field. But in Highmark Stadium, the fans are definitely on the field. The sidelines are very limited, the end zones and the sidelines, where you see the not only the players on the sidelines, but the cameramen and the support staff, security, all that stuff. It's too tight. You can't just plow snow like you do see in some stadiums. You just see the snowbanks in the corners of the end zones, off to the side. There's no room for that at Highmark Stadium. So everything has to be trucked out during the course of the week or in the hours leading up to kickoff. So those things you won't have to worry about. Roof, no roof, the new stadium takes care of a lot of that snow removal part. Really what it comes down to, as far as I'm concerned, is how safe it is to get there, whether the roads are plowed and that you have 2-lane roads heading towards Highmark Stadium, whether it be Abbott Road or Southwestern or whatever. Last night, so I made the calculated effort. I think there are 2 times to go to a Bills game, either really early or as close to kickoff as you can get, because people are in the stadium. So yesterday I decided I was going to wait until kind of late. And I didn't even tap my brakes in an unusual manner coming all the way from the North Towns. I got on the 290, the 190, the 219, the 20A exit. I hit the 20A, the red light at the bottom of the 20A exit, or where the cops, or the stop sign, I should say, and the cops are there. I waited no unusual amount of time, and I hit that first red light on 20A heading towards the stadium, and I was stuck there for an hour. And the reason being, it wasn't because of the traffic. Car traffic was fine. It's the jagoffs walking in the middle of the street because there's no sidewalk, because the snow's plowed up and they didn't care. And so you have people walking in their snowsuits. There's one guy holding the handle of Tito's vodka, the big glass bottle with the handle on it, taking swigs out of that as he walked up 20A down the middle of the cars. So yeah, could we get some sidewalks? Some friggin' sidewalks would be helpful to get people to these stadiums so they're not walking in the middle of the street.
This was some of the argument for having a stadium downtown, as they would use more public transportation, or the tailgate scene would be replaced by more of a indoor bar scene, and there'd be less people in the streets, or spread out in kind of different footprint of the city around a downtown stadium.
Yeah, it would require a lot more in terms of interstate highway type stuff to get people in and out of there. I mean, you see, if you leave, we're, I guess, fortunate in that when we cover Sabres games, we have work to do. We do interviews, we have writing to do before we leave the arena. Most everybody is out of the garages and the parking areas, but it is still a nightmare sometimes. If you leave, even 45 minutes to an hour after the game, you're sitting in gridlock trying to get out of that arena. And now imagine that times 5 in terms of, the amount of people that are down there trying to leave what would be over by the Perry Projects, where you have one road that takes you to the 190 and maybe another back way you can get to Route 5. There would need to be a lot of interstate type egress, all kinds of, things, and then we're talking about plumbing and sewage lines. And yeah, it would be a huge cost. And one of the reasons why, if the people who were seriously backing a downtown stadium, with, 5 months before the final decision was made, it was too late by then. You needed to start planning for a downtown stadium like Detroit did about 8 years before the new stadium, before a shovel was going to go into ground to build this new stadium. You couldn't just decide, what? Oh, they're building a new stadium, let's put it downtown. Too late by then. Too late. You needed city, county, state officials, the Bills, the transition team that I wrote about, the new stadium working committee that had one meeting. It met once, and it was after Ralph Wilson died, and they didn't meet again. There's so much ridiculousness. malfeasance was a word I was going to use. Malfeasance is a little too despicable. But there was too much apathy and what's the word? Malpractice, not malfeasance. It was malpractice, urban planning malpractice, to just not bother. And then by the time the Pagulas decided they were going to build a new stadium, or it was time for everybody to work together to build a new stadium, because the current one was falling down and wasn't going to last long enough to uh, plan a city stadium or do something elaborate with a dome and convention center and all that stuff. They needed a stadium built pretty quick. And the quickest way to do it and cheapest way to do it was across the street in Orchard Park with no roof and no convention center and none of the other stuff. So the city, a lot of people want to blame the Pagulas, and I'm not shy in blaming them for a lot of things. But if you wanted to build a downtown stadium, roof or no roof, it needed to be planned by Byron Brown and Mark Poloncarz and Governor Cuomo at the time, and probably even Ralph Wilson's people or the Pagulas shortly after they took over a long time ago.
Well, it's definitely too late since the new stadium is about 60% built, and they're so far along in their
I
project.
think they should tear it down and just you can use the
No,
materials.
no.
You could take the
What I mean
materials
is,
piece by piece and just put it down in the Perry projects. Although they're building in the Perry projects now too. As soon as they started building in Orchard Park, the new stadium, all those people, I think, who were buying up and speculating that a new stadium was going to go downtown threw up their hands and said, well, I guess our gamble didn't pay off. Time to start putting some housing down here.
well, maybe they'll build a soccer stadium. But with the Bills stadium, it probably is too late with the money and the deals to put a roof on the stadium, but it's not, physically too late. It still could be added to the project at the end. And there's issues beyond lake effect snow. There's issues with the colder temperatures, potentially with rain, lightning, probably some other weather events, and then the overall usefulness 12 months out of the year that you can get out of a facility that would have a roof. That I think it still should be considered, or at the very least, shouldn't be the door slammed shut on the logic as to why, I forget the number, but I think you reported it. There's a 1.5 or something, 150 million added on. They could put a roof on there, but it was kind of a cost savings idea to not have that as part of the project. It's technically possible with the
I think it was $500 million.
Was it that much? Okay.
Well, I think so.
That's a lot, but
2.1 billion right now is the working figure for the cost of the stadium. I'm sure that's not going to be the final price, but friend of the show, John Worrell, reported that a couple of weeks ago. 2.1 billion. The Bills have updated it, but I've also been talking to some experts regarding that stadium price. 2.1 billion. The story in the Buffalo News is framed as see what Terry Pegula is doing for you. He's this is good. He's giving to the community. The original cost was set at 1.5 billion, with the county paying a flat rate and the state paying a flat rate, and the Pegulas paying all overages. So with that extra $600 million coming out of the Pegulas' pocket. So I was talking to some people, industry experts who were in stadium construction, who work with the National Football League, the National Hockey League, other sports that have to build arenas and stadiums. And I asked them when that report came out, because they were reaching out to me and saying, hey, that's it's going to go up. It's even going to go higher because construction costs and unions and doing business in the state of New York, you never get a discount, right? It's always going to increase as time goes on. And so the comments that I was receiving from my sources, about it going up. So I said, how do we know? How do we know that this is accurate? And I'm not calling anybody a liar, but what compels the Bills or Terry Pegula or Pete Gwelly or anybody else, the construction people? Is there any kind of accounting that is public? Because the state and the county are paying their $850 million. Beyond that, what's the public record? Do you have to say? I mean, how do we know that it's not 2.7 billion right now? I had people telling me it was going to be over 2 billion 6 months ago, 8 months. I don't know. I have to go back and look. I maybe even written about it. The one story that I did that said this thing is not going to be built for less than $2 billion. And I was getting pushback from the Bills. That's not true. That's not what our numbers say. That's not what our numbers say. So anyways, the point being, or the answer that I was getting from these stadium industry experts is they don't have to tell you this number is just whatever, again, it could be 100% accurate as of right now, but there's also a PR piece to this of what's a number we can say right now where it's not embarrassing to us that we totally blew it. And yet we can say, paint it in such a way of, this is good for the community, that this is not bad news, that it is now 600 million more than we thought it was going to cost.
Yeah.
I
don't think the Bills executives would lie. And I think if they were hiding the baby on the number, that it somehow would leak out, you would probably find that out. But I do think that they've deduced that.
I don't know that anybody else has that number.
Yeah, but I mean, I just think in theory, I
Right,
think that there'd be a sideways way that some kind of foil with the county or the state, that a documentation could come up that somebody could find the number if it was wrong, or that somebody that really knew what the real number was would put that out there eventually. It might take some time. I don't think the Bills would risk the executives themselves, flat out lying about it. But there's probably ways that you can manipulate the public relations. You can put out a number. This number changes over time. So you put out the number at a certain time when you like what it sounds like, and then no longer update that number if it gets higher than you want it to be. But it seems like the Bills have deduced that it's good PR for Terry Pegula and the club to indicate how much they're paying overage and how committed they are to the project. And that if they didn't like the number, if they were embarrassed by the overruns, which I don't know publicly if that's something to be embarrassed about. It might be privately with who made the deal, but I think publicly, the billionaire owner should probably be touting how many of his billions he's putting into this project. And if they didn't like what that number, if it started to rise even more and they didn't want it out there, then they would just kind of stop confirming that to reporters and make you find that out some other way.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm trying to find that story that I wrote regarding where I had some sources telling me that it was maybe going to be 2 billion. I can't. I just wanted to find the date that story ran just to see how long ago. But yeah, I received considerable pushback on that. No, 2 billion. I don't know. I don't know that number. That's not my number. That's not our number that we're working with. Well, now it's 2.1 billion.
I don't think fans or the average person really cares. I think they care to the extent of how much public money is being spent, but how much the Pegula spend.
Well, I can tell you why they would care,
matters.
Because it could affect how much money is going to be put into the hockey arena.
Well,
I mean, what's going to happen with the hockey arena? If the owner, and maybe this is leading to this 25% or 20 to 25% minority stake that is being sold off in the Bills and bringing in potential new ownership. And I don't know, you're talking about private equity and all these other things. We don't know what the agreements are going to be, but under a traditional minority stake, you have somebody who's putting in that kind of money. There might be right of first refusal on purchasing the rest of the team if it ever gets sold from Terry Pegula to his children, or if they ever put the team up for sale in general. But you also could get into a situation of a guy who can't afford it, Terry Pegula is a multi-billionaire, but he probably just doesn't have 600 million in change laying around. I mean, this is or $1 billion, or however much it goes up, or whatever he wants to do. His hockey team constantly loses money. There's an arena that is going to need to be renovated. From what I'm told, they're not going to build a new one. But how much is the county or the state going to be willing to help out? Maybe the Pegulas in paying more than expected. Maybe there's some sympathy. I don't know, but I do know that there are people with both the county and the state that are, I wouldn't say they're thrilled that the stadium is going to cost more than first projected, but they took a lot of heat from the public for giving as much taxpayer money that they did at 1.4 billion or 1 point whatever, that initial figure, the 1.4 billion, I think it was. And now all of a sudden it's going to cost way more. Now it's starting to look more and more favorable for the public that they were limited in how much, the percentage of the cost for the public is going down and down with every extra million that gets added or 100 million that gets added to the bottom line of this stadium. So I don't know. What's the appetite going to be for public money for a hockey arena, for a team that can't win, for a team that is, that has the longest drought in the NHL, all that type of stuff. A team that even with some excitement on the ice this year and Lindy Ruff and whatever boost they thought they were going to get there, and a team that is playing competent hockey and just, I don't know where they are with this, after these last few games, but just last week they were in a playoff spot. And yet they still have, I believe, the second worst attendance in the National Hockey League. Now, we're not getting those boosts. There haven't been any Maple Leafs games yet. Leafs with an F, not a V. Maple Leafs games to boost that attendance, those types of, they're about to have a 5-game homestand here, but I don't know. That's where I think it matters.
Well, I think some of the reasons why there's been an attendance issue over the last few years, it's mostly due to the product on the ice, but some of it has been the state of disrepair of the arena. There are some longtime season ticket holders that got kind of fed up, especially if you're in the 300 level concourse. And I do think the Sabres need to be a thriving franchise in order for there to be a very strong appetite from the public for public money to put into the arena. But I do think the hunger grows a little bit different than the Bill Stadium because there's a lot of other programming at that arena. That's the downtown arena in Buffalo where there's concerts and Bandits play their home games and draw pretty well. And the NCAA tournament's going to be there a year from now, and wrestling and different things like that. I think that everybody that goes to the arena would like to see further upgrades. I think the scoreboard looks wonderful and it's a nice touch for events that aren't just the hockey games. And I think that people want more of that and more development around the arena and that back end, and finish some of the projects that have been started and make that more of a finished product on a canal side in the arena district. The proposed soccer stadium plays a role into that, the different properties that Douglas Jamal has bought. I think there's a lot of appetite for all of those projects to be finished. And at one point that was supposed to be Pagulaville, and he was going to develop all of this, and maybe a football stadium was part of that. Now it's transitioned to some different projects, but getting the arena up to date, I think, is part of that.
Yeah, it's interesting how that has all changed. The Pagulas don't even run 716 anymore. It's not even 716. Yeah, they're the landlord, but the Buffalo News building that Doug Jamal has purchased. I mean, there are all kinds of things right there that were supposed to be part of this complex that just have fallen out of favor. The Pagulas buying the building where the Labatt Brew House is, and all the different structures that were in and around there in that cobblestone district.
The Swanee House, who's going to buy that building and kind of keep that tradition intact in some ways, or will that get bought up by Jamal and turned into a apartment complex?
Hearing anything about that, Jonah? By the
No,
way,
I haven't heard anything. And I should maybe clarify, I haven't heard that it's going to get sold to a developer and changed either. I've heard you would know more about that than I do. I've heard nothing.
I'm not asking. You didn't. It's not that you piqued my interest, and I thought maybe you were saying something. I know that these are still the types of things that you hear about. I mean, one of the reasons that you're one of the best journalists I've ever been around is that you have, I don't want to make it seem suspicious, but you hear from so many different places. I mean, we can have a discussion about any topic, sports or non-sports, and somebody or have, and it's not just a gossip thing. It's like you have people. I thought maybe
well, I
might
appreciate that. I mean, I
heard
go
something.
places and I have different beats, so I'm not insulated in different circles.
right.
And even I don't know a lot of downtown developers, but I do know a few people that are in that business. And I probably could, if I asked around, find out maybe some rumors at least of who's interested and what the plans for that property might be. It's a big difference between, hearing what people are hearing and finding reportable facts on it. But I don't know. I am curious myself, and I think that area needs a few more bars and restaurants and places to hang out and places to eat. And the Swanee House being the oldest and most traditional should be revived. And I haven't been into this Southern Tier Brewing very much. I probably went to the 716 place more, but 716 seemed like a good concept, along with that Labatt Brew House being right by the arena and being places that were really ideal for going to before and after Sabres games or other sporting events. And I'm not sure if the properties that have replaced them are as good or the same vibe. I feel like a place like 716 or what 716 tried to be should be in that space.
I just found the article I was referring to. It was when Ron Raccuia was fired, August 2023. I reported that sources were predicting that the stadium, two different sources, independent, were predicting that it would be between 1.7 and 1.9 billion, as material costs likely continue to rise over the next 3 years. And those were numbers that people at One Bills Drive were pushing back on me, or pushed back at me, that those weren't accurate. And here we are now at 2.1 billion. So that's just why I was bringing up the point earlier. Again, I'm not calling anybody deceitful or even fibbing or whatever, but I guess my point was off of that is there's nothing that is forcing them to tell to be transparent about this. They don't have to be. So
if the number goes up again, they don't have to tell us. Maybe that's a strategy to put the number out now because it's only going to get bigger, and this is.
Yeah, but this was 2023 that people were saying 1.7 to 1.9, and so that's now 16 months ago. So 2.1. That's the estimate now, according to the Buffalo Bills, and I think the Buffalo News and John Moore, the Associated Press, both independently reported 2.1 billion. Now that's not the final, but that's the working number now. The Buffalo Sabres start a 5-game home stretch here. Some big games coming up, some big opponents: Colorado, Winnipeg, and old friend Scott Arniel. Jonah, you've been around the Sabres. I have not for the last week or so. Well, I haven't been around them for a bit, but the Sabres, where are we? They win 3 in a row. They lost 3 in a row, although they picked up a point in overtime against Vancouver. That was all right. So the 1-0 loss to the Wild was an impressive loss. You have those in hockey. You get goalied. They just couldn't score a goal. Bad puck luck, whatever you want to say. They played, I think, a competitive and effective game, the type of game that if they play that on most nights, they're probably going to the playoffs if they keep playing like that. Then Vancouver jumps out to a lead. Buffalo scores a couple of goals late to steal a point. So they showed some pluck. I'm using all kinds of hockey cliche words. And so I think you could even come out of that loss to the Canucks, that overtime loss, as a Sabres fan and say, okay, still, I mean, they're showing some resolve. And then a 3-0 loss to the Islanders out in Uniondale. And so now they're at 3 in a row, with Colorado coming in tomorrow night, and then Winnipeg, then Utah, then Detroit, then the New York Rangers. New York Rangers trying to find themselves. I guess just to set that up, what is this? What's the state of the Sabres?
Well, still remains to be seen. It's been a very up and down season. I feel like every time we record a podcast, they're in a bit of a down stretch, and it's we're kind of talking about what they're going through and how it's more of the same. But they won 3 in a row. The third time this season they've done that. They haven't gotten that 4th win in any of the opportunities they've had for a 4-game win streak. Then they lose 3 in a row. But I don't know if they play that much different over the course of those 3 games on the road and then the 3 games coming. Disappointing that they lose 2 home games in that stretch, but that was against probably better competition than they played on the road. They had to come back to win, I think, 2 of those games on the road. One of them was in overtime at Anaheim. Outshot in some of these games, and their goalie won them the game, and then they're losing games where they had more shots and more scoring opportunities and got beat really by the opposing goalie. I think the best thing to be happy about with the Sabres.
When Reimer
Yeah.
played the game that he did out on the West Coast, and you're thinking, man, this team's got it figured out. When the backup can come in and they can win out West in such a fashion, the 3-game sweep. Yeah, you're thinking this has been figured out.
Yeah, and Reimer didn't play poorly in the loss against the Islanders either, with at least his save percentage and things like that. That was a game where the Sabres really got beat and they got outshot and they got shut out. But I think, the season is ticking away. They cannot continue to have these stretches of winning 3 in a row, losing 3 in a row, and be that streaky. They have to get on the right side of things record-wise sooner than later. They're 11th place in the conference right now. They're only 3 points out of a wild card spot, but that's going to get harder and harder to make it into that playoff spot if you don't get more consistent play and more consistent wins. Tage Thompson was out of the lineup. They win those games without him. He comes back. Now they're losing with him. They really need to get settled in. They're pretty healthy, but stay healthy. Get their best lineup out there and really play their best. And a 5-game homestand is an opportunity to do that. It does come with some really tough opponents early on in the homestand. But this is the opportunity. They're past American Thanksgiving. This is really when the Sabres really need to show whether they're a playoff team or not this year. Although it does seem like they're going to play well enough and be competitive enough to keep stringing it along. I don't think they're going to be out of it at any point until very late in the season. But the anxiety level for Sabres fans is a lot higher than it is for Bills fans. They're not delivering night after night the way that most fans really wish they would.
University of Buffalo football program has wrapped up its regular season. Fine fashion. Being able to close out with how many in a row? 3, 4?
They lost their last 4. They won their last 4 games to finish 8-4. They're one of, I think, 13 teams in the country that went undefeated in November. They didn't win a game in November in the previous season under coach Maurice Linguist. So
damn,
there's a lot of things that they've done.
Never.
Yeah,
they didn't win a single November game.
Well, last year they're 3-9 and they struggled down the stretch. The year before, they got really hot midseason, but then they lost a few games in the regular season. They ended up going on and winning the bowl game and finishing that season with a win. But yeah, they struggled in the midweek matching games and the late season conference games under Maurice Linguist, and now they won them all under Pete Lembo. It wasn't enough to get them to the MAC title game. They were pretty close, but didn't quite get there. But they're going to be in a bowl game, and 8-4, 8 regular season wins. I think this is the 3rd time they've done that, if not the 4th, but the 3rd time. And they've never gotten to 9, or they've had a 10-win season, but they've never had 9 wins, or they've never had 10 wins more than the one time that they did. So they have an opportunity, if they can win their bowl game, to have really one of the best seasons in UB history, which is in a year with a new coach and some roster turnover. What the expectations weren't that high. So it's already been a successful season, and there's going to be one more opportunity to end it with potentially a 5-game winning streak going out.
I don't have knowledge of how this works or who it might be, but how does the MAC Coach of the Year go? Does it usually go to the guy who wins the conference or the new guy who outperformed expectations, like in the National Football League? What's the MAC? How do they vote on it? It's
often the best coach of the best team, but I do think Pete Lembo has a really good case. They were picked 10th in the preseason poll, and they finished, 3rd or 4th. So I think that he certainly gets votes, and, I'd have to break it down and look at who was supposed to be good and who was not supposed to be good. I mean, everybody's kind of dealing with a roster turnover situation. So we'll see, but, I wouldn't be surprised. I think Pete Lembo has had a MAC Coach of the Year type season, but oftentimes, like I think Lance Leipold won it when UB had the best record. It often is a reward for, the best team gets Coach of the Year and Player of the Year. Maybe not always both in the same year, but oftentimes that's how it works.
High school football. Jonah, I know you had some thoughts that you wanted to share before we wrap up.
I just kind of wanted to know, we got two teams playing for state championships this weekend down in Syracuse. Salamanca in Class C, still undefeated. Clymer Sherman Panama merged team in Class D. They won the state title in 2018.
Yeah, where are Clymer fans at? Clymer fans, put
the
comments.
CSP Wolfpack. Be careful what you say about
Oh,
CSP.
that's right. That's right. CSP. I forgot.
Yeah.
Hey, CSP, comment. Come on now.
Yeah, well, they'll write your name on your shirts if you say the wrong
Oh,
thing
that's
about
right. That's right.
But yeah, two West New York teams have had great seasons. They have an opportunity to end with a state championship. Everybody else is eliminated. Canisius played the state Catholic final at home. I covered that game. Now that's a snow game where I wasn't in the press box. I was standing outside on the sidelines, kind of watching that lake effect drift in. It wasn't quite as bad as it could have been, but it was starting to get snowier and windier and colder as that game progressed. And Canisius against the number one team in the state from downstate, Iona Prep, played with them for a half, but really couldn't keep up in the second half.
I saw a tweet or what is it, a Blue Sky? What do they call it? A post.
Yeah, I don't know.
Saw a social media post about Canisius beating Iona in the state Catholic championship. And I'm like, what? I thought it was college basketball. I'm like, how come I've never heard of this? I was confusing to me. And then I checked into it.
Yeah, well,
And then
you
I
gotta
thought,
know.
yeah. And then I thought, man, maybe Canisius basketball is better than I thought.
Or
They're
maybe
playing
Canisius,
they're playing for a state championship.
maybe Canisius brought football back after all these years.
Um,
Canisius and Niagara do start their conference play this weekend. The MAC is that really the only conference in the country that does that. But they both got their home doubleheaders Friday, Sunday.
what do you mean? The only conference that does what?
Starts in early December.
Oh, I see.
Pretty much everybody else gets going in January or the very end of December, but the MAC plays these two games early December and then gets back to a few more non-conference games.
Let's get this rivalry going. Let's get all this stuff. Come on.
Yeah.
Jerry
McNamara, GMAC coaching the Santa Saints. They'll be in town.
Maction. All right. Anything else, Jonah? Trying to think if there's anything.
I think we touched it all. We can get into the Bandits preview later in the week. They get started soon.
Yeah. We'll try to come back here and do the double dip. We'll receive the ball after halftime on Friday and try to score some points. Jonah, thank you. Thank you to everybody out there for listening to Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK, CPAs and Business Consultants. Please subscribe on your platform of choice, comment, hit the like button, do all the things that let us know you're out there listening, and we'll catch you on the flippity flop.
The financial needs of a business go beyond tax and attest services. That's why CTBK goes beyond accounting services and offers outsourced solutions through their affiliation with CFO Solutions Plus. These additional services allow clients to focus on their operational and long-term strategic goals. Trust CTBK's outsourced solutions to provide cost-effective, value-added financial services tailored to your company's needs. Call CTBK at 716-630-2400. Again, 716-630-2400. Or go to ctbk.com to learn more about CTBK's outsourced solutions.